Hey, this is Chris Powell.
And this is AJ Barce.
We are the co-hosts of the Bellingham Podcast, and guess what? We are professionals.
And we make mistakes.
And like you're going to see a mistake in this episode as we talk about episode 177. Well, guess what? We already recorded that. So this is actually episode 179.
Yes.
Don't be fooled about what you're about to hear. We're actually progressing to 200, and this coming up is episode 179 of the Bellingham Podcast.
You've tuned into the Bellingham Podcast for the week of January 31st, 2021. This is episode 177. From Crow's Overhead City by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barce.
And straight up in 98226, I am Chris Powell. Catch that? We'll talk about it in a second. On this episode, AJ and I are going to put the needle on the record when the dope beats go like this. And in that case, this is the Bellingham Podcast.
How you doing, Chris?
I'm just dandy right now. Not as cold for a January in Bellingham as one would expect. Where are we, AJ Barce?
We are at the Big Rock Garden at the top of Sylvan Street on Alabama Hill in Bellingham, Washington.
It's the notorious BRG.
It is the notorious BRG. We're actually by the this is the pagoda that is the commemoration, if I recall. I don't have the plaque in front of me. It commemorizes helping children in Korea during the Korean War. Chris, can you fact check me on that?
Yeah, I will fact check you because I'm standing up from where I'm seated, and there's actually a plaque here, the Korean War Children's Memorial Pavilion. Come on over, AJ.
Okay, I did get it right. We'll do this. What is that?
Dedicated
NPR
to
style?
the American servicemen and women for their aid to the children of Korea back in 2003. The dedication. Yep. So we're standing under that wonderful little pagoda type thing, and now we're going to move back to our seated spots.
Wow, that's some pretty good audio commentary.
Fun fact about the Big Rock Garden and my connection with it. Way back in the day before my beautiful wife, I was a musician about town, and I was part of a trio called Evolution Trio.
Nice.
It was a wonderful experience with a couple musicians here in Bellingham, and we had an opportunity to play the Big Rock Garden right over yonder behind you, which is a little bit of a little balcony deck area overlooking the city with trees in the back. And we had a wonderful seating of lawn chairs of people and picnic chairs. The problem that existed for that in Big Rock Garden, the curators of this beautiful location, like this is a destination for Bellingham unto itself.
Totally.
The curators were adamant, and I mean they put the atom in adamant, that there was no electricity to be used during this performance.
All acoustic?
All acoustic.
Okay.
And the problem was I'm an electric bass player with electric bass.
Yeah.
And I fought that. I'm like, I could bring a battery powered amp. Nope. It's an acoustic
venue.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so I had to contact a musician in this community who had an acoustic bass. And
right.
I was able to perform the gig. But you know what? An acoustic bass sounds beautiful, but it doesn't have the amplification thump like the electric bass does. Let's get to the show.
Well, that falls into what we're talking about, which is audiophilia.
The lovers of audio.
Yes. So I mean, yeah, that's a good dovetail. So this is gonna be actually a two-parter, and we're gonna be tackling the hi-fi and the lo-fi of music and audio in today's digital and audio analog age.
And for those of you who are not aware, the Phi stands for fidelity.
Right. So opening up this, my birthday is coming up, Chris. And my wonderful and beautiful wife got me something that I've mentioned a couple episodes back. I used to have a turntable, and the mixer, the receiver, the amplifier, the two stack, the whole thing. And early young days of AJ being in Bellingham, rent was expensive, had to sell stuff, and on top of that, hauling all of that stuff to small dinky apartments in this town, not great.
1,000 songs in your pocket does not qualify for the long play vinyl record wax.
I did get an iPod mini out of it. So I had the caveat, my wife and I had just started dating, so she didn't really remember much of the vinyl and the differences and stuff, because I had an iPod and an iHome. It's the same thing. It's music, right? And so fast forward, as time went on, I've been kind of eyeballing things, and I really wanted to have a turntable for my son. I can remember my young days, my own pops and I in our front living room. And I remember my dad showing me drop a needle on the record and stuff. I don't even remember what the records were, to be honest. I've got some of them still, but I liked those memories and I carried them with them. And the fact that, I had my pops and my mom's albums, like the fact that music could be passed down. Now, not all of it's to my taste, but still, it was more the memory around the music, not necessarily the vinyl itself. And now that I have, a 4-year-old, I wanted to share that same thing because my son and I listen to a lot of the same tunes. He likes soca. He likes some lo-fi. And so that got me thinking about this. And so my wife got me a Heyday turntable. Not anything fancy, Chris. It's a $100 turntable with it has analog, or you can connect it through Bluetooth.
This is the Venn diagram of LP vinyl record players.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I wanted something that was convenient, not intimidating. Wow, those crows are getting louder.
Yeah, they're attending. They're our live studio audience. So if you hear crows crowing in the background, that's them.
Yeah, 3 out of 4 murders of crows agree with what my statement is. Out of it, I've had some good conversations with folks of why go back into vinyl, and why, especially in the hi-fi scene, to go through the effort of going analog just to pipe it through Bluetooth. Look, I'm just there's links in the show notes. And
for the love of all of the wax something, I don't have a cool thing. Just drink.
Here's the thing. As a technologist, I will say, I'm not going to say that vinyl is the best end-all, be-all for hi-fi, because honestly, technology has progressed, and there are things called FLAC files. You can look it up. There's links. And really, FLAC files and some of these high-resolution digital files provide what vinyl did provide. But there's one thing that's lacking, Chris, and that's what we're going to hit on probably on the second part of our episode, is the notion of albums, not singles. You have to go through an effort of preparing your vinyl, dropping a needle, and listening to it. You don't get to skip tracks very easily.
No, and for an example, my favorite song off this album is Time, but I'm not going to simply extract the song Time from Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Right.
That is something to be listened to in its entirety, front to back, and that is one of the touchstones of what we are getting into. Way back in the day, there were albums that were created for a reason, and the songs were sequenced in a certain fashion, as opposed to here's a hit single, here's a ballad, here's an ultra fast thing, here's a cover song, and here's a remake.
Right.
They had a specific plan in mind as they were releasing a long play album.
And so with that, the other thing that I like about this is, as opposed to going digital, Chris, I don't know about you, but over the years, I have acquired MP3s and WAV files and AIFFs and sing along if you know the extension game. And here's the thing is that if you listen to those early MP3s that you may have purchased or acquired, and you compare them to MP3 300, which is the highest grade, it's still technically a lossy file as opposed to lossless, but not to get too far in the tech weeds, basically it still has to be compressed. The file is compressed, which is where you get weird anomalies in audio, especially when you're putting it through a sound system.
Very loud car stereo.
When you have something like vinyl, the fact is that this is a 120-year-old technology. It still has a place in the digital era, because here's the thing, I have my mom and dad's vinyl, most of it. My son will have whatever albums that we collect as a family. And if he ends up having to scrap for some money in his young days as a young adult, fine, so be it. But it's the memories, not the albums, that I want him to carry with him. So to kind of jump off into our setups. So when my wife got me an early birthday present, I had Reciprocity. And she never really owned a LP before. So I sought out, shout out to Helen Jane Long out of the United Kingdom. She is a wonderful instrumental and pianist. And if you want some really nice, just great, easy listening, check out her work. She was the artist that we walked to in our wedding.
Aha. Now, I can hear that in the distance. Not the crows in this case.
No.
It's all of our listeners going, "Aw." Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. So her first album was Perspective. If you want to look it up, it's a great album, digital or LP. And for her, again, going back, she doesn't really remember much of the record set that I had. She dropped the needle for the first time. And our sound system is literally our entertainment center that's attached to our TV. So it's a sound bar. It's a Vizio sound bar with a subwoofer. Ain't anything fancy or impressive, honestly.
There is a subtlety that you can get, the air moving through speakers and the sound that comes from a phonograph.
Yes.
Versus digital. I can experience it, and there's the subtle clicks and pops
as
well.
Well, you can take those out. I mean, that's just cleaning your equipment,
But those clicks and pops add life to the thing. It's the not exact measurement of the slow food movement when you're cooking a meal. This is a slow music movement.
Well, I like to frame it more like experience versus convenience. Okay, it is not convenient to play an LP, but it is an experience to do it. And more, dear listeners, if you've listened to Chris and I, heckle for 176 episodes now, because the first one doesn't count. Look, we want you to be able, especially in today's day and age. We've heard you. We hear from you a lot, like disconnecting and resonating with some of the stuff that we talk about. Your information diet has been on overload for way too long. I challenge you, dear listener, the next time, after you get done playing this digital podcast, go pick an album, whether it's a CD and a digital stream, whatever. And for the entire album, sit, listen to it, and don't mindlessly swipe on a digital device. Don't answer that text. Read a book. Write in your journal. Okay? Cook.
Look out the window.
Look out the window.
Yep.
Okay? And then ask yourself how you feel after that. That's all I'm going to say. Like that's really what it boils down for me, is that it's an experience of, appreciating the music for what it is and the time that you spend with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Chris, Chuck D me with your digital setup.
Well, I've gone all the way from having the compact disc player, single loading tray when it came out.
Oh, yeah.
I worked my butt off in high school to afford one of those when it was a compact disc digital player.
Oh, yeah.
With the component stereo system. But, I don't like having a lot of things, go figure. And I have a Bluetooth speaker, and currently it's the Soundcore Flare Plus. It looks like a little bit of a big can of beverage. And it's got the bass, and it's got the little neon light, and it's pretty when the room is dim, and it provides adequate sound system. I've played venues that have rip your head off loud sound quality.
The Marshall stack that can literally blow clothes off.
I am not in the audiophile category, and I totally give props to those who are, because they love their craft. They're a hobbyist. This is their thing. Give me a Bluetooth speaker with a good enough where I can hear the subtleties of an ambient album, which is what I normally play when I'm working, and I'm happy. I have pretty much an iPhone or a device, like an iPad, not much else, and that's my player. And going in through a Bluetooth speaker, it's really simple. And, the sound bar does add the oomph when you're watching a movie. I really don't need that experience, because I've already seen the movie in the theater when I'm paying $15, and I look forward to that again. But to be able to get the rumble seats and the OMG, my ears are ringing, loud decibels from the action scenes, I don't need that in my home. That's just my personal preference. So the audio, even though we don't have neighbors directly next to us because we live in a single family dwelling, it's not that much of a factor to me, but the music that I play is a factor to me. The sound quality is not one of my deal breakers. There may come a time when I'm like, yep, I want the room dedicated where there's one chair with the armrests, like the Maxell Corporation. Remember, listeners from the 80s, the dude being, with his hair blowing in the advertisement? Yeah. You have the chair, you have the high quality reference monitors, and that rumble to the start of Dark Side of the Moon, or dare I say David Lee Roth's Eat 'Em and Smile from 1986. That will be the pinnacle of when I invest in a sound system. Otherwise, I'm pretty simple.
Well, no, but okay. So I actually, to dovetail into your story. So when I was in grad school, I had an audio file of a prof. Shout out to Stan if he's listening. And as a dutiful grad student, and you're doing your research and stuff, you visit your professors' homes and stuff. And I remember visiting his for the first time because he was an audiophile, and he was probably the first minimalist I actually met, because I came from you have to have the amplifier, you got your preamp, you got to put it into the receiver, you got to put in, from a tech's perspective, I always looked at it from the gear, because that's what I would do. I used to be a media technician, and he had a room his wife also was a beautiful musician in her own right, plays piano. And I remember he told me to sit down, and he put on, I don't remember what it was, some sort of symphony, and it was on LP, and it played through the room, and you couldn't see, other than the LP player, you couldn't see anything else. He had everything masked, and he had acoustic tiling, but I didn't notice it because it was artistically done.
Yep.
And if you sat right there, his hobby was he wanted to have the most minimalist setup, true analog, soup to nuts. And so it was one amplifier that he had handcrafted for him in his room, with the speakers everything was matched, but it was just turntable, amplifier, speaker, and that was it.
Yep.
And I never thought of it that way.
There's a way to be able to take a song and turn it into an emotional experience. I would think that the amount of time investment, the amount of curation in the technology, if you are one to do the slow food movement, you talk about bread making.
Sure.
A lot of simple ingredients make this wonderful end result. Yeah. If you really are down with your coffee and you get the K-cups, but you've got all these other accessories to put in the coffee once it's brewed, that's something similar. You know, what is your area of interest? In this case, for your grad teacher, it was creating an emotional experience that transcended just a Walkman cassette player with the foam earphones and stuff. I give props to that. But, you know, for a lot of us, I think the music experience, especially since we're so connected with rapid fire accessing of information, that's going to be a tough challenge to get to that place. And where's a single parent of a couple kiddos who are not able to abide by the rules? We're going to be quiet while mommy or daddy listens to the song now. Where can you get that in a 3-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment condo? To be able to get that? Well, maybe there can be a couple noise-canceling headphones that you can have to find that music that can evoke that emotional connection in your life.
No, and that's what's nice about having more of these more contemporary turntables. Yes, you can spend gagzooks money on this, and you know, audiophiles might turn their nose on the fact that, you know, you're playing it through Bluetooth. But if that's the avenue, like you said, if that is that you can get the emotional experience plus the music that you need for your detox or your mental unwind or whatever, then by all means do that. You know, the splurge would be more of the headphones, right? Like the Bose sound canceling. Like
sure.
If you don't have a room, you can make it within the technology, and that's what's nice about this bridge of analog and digital. You can get the experiential side through analog, but the convenient side of digital.
And as a corollary challenge to our dear listeners, I would wage, one of the things I do when I'm watching a movie that I've seen before, I like really immersing myself in what was going on with that movie. Mm-hmm. And so therefore I have IMDb on and I'm looking at the trivia and learn more about what went on in the movie's production creation. If you were to maybe after or sometime before listening to an album full length without a screen, do a little research on the artist. And if there's some kind of website that talks about a review of the album or what they did to create that music, try an album that you've heard your elders talk about with great reverence, and give it a try and see what all the hubbub is. And you might encounter another possibility of expanding your horizons. I was really shocked that my beautiful 18-year-old daughter really enjoys Natalie Cole. Like the Unforgettable album?
Yeah.
No, and a lot of these classic Nat King Cole style songs. Because here's someone who's on the bleeding edge of technology and stuff, and she has playlists that, as I'm hearing it through the house when she was here with us, she's back in college, boys, tough luck here in Bellingham, to listen to this classic music. She's got her own playlists of singles. Right. Yeah, there's a time and place for that. But to go back into an era that is not of overproduced, overcompressed, overdecibelized, hyper technologically produced music, it's like, wow. I was like, well, this is cool and interesting. So I think there, there are some out there who are evolved or are evolving to willing to give things a try. Now, I'm not talking about Racer X Street Lethal's debut album, in case you're interested in Paul Gilbert playing 64th notes in a double bass kick drum heavy metal guitar album. But if you try something from what your elders are really into, well, here's a way to be able to at least have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Like Bonnie Raitt said, let's give him something to talk about.
Oh, wow.
How about analog? No, I'm just kidding. All right.
See, I knew you'd have too much fun with having an episode on audiophilia and dropping all of the music references that you normally do anyway.
Dude, this could be a part 10 if you get me involved in music. That's been a big part of my life. But anyway.
So with all those references, I've got something that I would like to dovetail into, and that is our quality assurance.
That's right.
Something else of note, because these picks are picked for you by Chris Powell and AJ Barce for your quality assurance.
That's right.
So I wanted to bring up, if you're listening to this and you're going, I kind of want to dabble in this, whether it's digital or the physical, doing the LP or whatever. If you wanted to, and you have obscure preferences, okay, like if you like the indie bands, the pandemic's been hard on a lot of musicians. We've mentioned this before. And there's this service that we like called Bandcamp.
Oh, yeah.
Not a paid plug. We just like their service. What's cool about Bandcamp, and I've bought several albums from various different bands, one of which based out of Seattle, Washington, that has a very cult following because they only had one album that was pinnacle to people in the elder millennial generation, such as myself.
Smile when you say elder, cowboy. I'm a decade older than you.
Yeah, shout out to the Postal Service. They were basically a one-album wonder, and the album was called Give Up. And anybody who was in college, like myself, when that album came out, like it elicits a lot of emotion and memory, because everything on that album was great. They had a 10-year anniversary edition that went on LP. You cannot find it. If you can, it's hugely expensive. So, dear listener, if you're a fan of the Postal Service, if you go to Bandcamp and you follow the Postal Service, you can still get Give Up on LP for a reasonable price, because you're buying it straight from the label and the artists themselves, Sub Pop Records, out of Seattle, Washington.
It's a corollary. That's my term of the show. To buy local.
Yeah,
you're going directly. Farm to table. How about artist to platter? Vinyl record platter.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
But that's what's great is that you're supporting. Sure, Bandcamp probably has a commission for sales, but
probably better than Apple's would.
Probably, but that's the thing is that if you're listening to this today and you're like, man, I kind of want to dabble in this audiophilia that you guys are talking about. Start at Bandcamp, and especially if you like indie bands, because one, in this pandemic, you're supporting them and their music. The second thing is, if you want to dabble in vinyl and get a cheap turntable or whatever, and you get a record out of something like a band out of Bandcamp, a lot of the times the band will give you also those high resolution MP3 or FLAC files, so you can have best of both worlds.
It's audio swag of the good kind.
Sure.
I'm riffing here. Give me a break.
No. But that's the great thing is that you can listen for yourself. And again, I really wanted to bring the notion that you don't have to be a hi-fi snob or a hi-fi hipster to do this. We're talking about music and bringing the experience of it and joy back to it, and not doing just the hits, listening to it soup to nuts. Awesome. And the time you spend. So, Chris, do you have something for your quality assurance?
Absolutely. So I've been, for a majority of these 177 episodes, an ambassador of ambient, in which I really extol the virtues of the tempo-less, wordless waves of sonic creation that are great to have in the background and such. And for quality, in addition to Bandcamp, there's a wonderful app cross-platform that you could have on your phone in your discovery. All that you purchase can be shown in through there, and I think you can actually play albums to audition through the app.
Oh, cool.
To see what you're getting before you throw down on the cashola. There is another site out there that I enjoy, another record label of the ambient ilk called A Strangely Isolated Place.
Rad.
Because Bellingham sometimes is a strangely isolated place. There's my tie-in to Bellingham. They have a great list of artists and music, and if you've heard me yammer on about ambient music, there's a wonderful primer article to read on ASIP, if you will, called Neither Seen Nor Heard, A Journey Through Ambient Music. It's a great read. It talks you through the history of ambient music way back when Brian Eno, the Godfather, if you will, maybe may have coined the term, but it talks about the 70s ambient, 80s ambient, 90s, aughts, and up till nowadays. Great introduction of a primer. And then also, in addition to the Bandcamp app, which we both agree for quality assurance, there is a strangely isolated place has made the venture of a 24/7 streaming website that also is an app available on a device of yours. And it's called 9128.live. That's
crazy.
the actual website. 9128. Now, as you're visualizing those numbers, think about them in the digital clock font.
91.
If you take ASIP, 9128 is a little bit of a derivation reversed of ASIP.
Got it.
And so that's a little bit of a cheeky play on words or, a cheeky pun. But check that out because it's streaming ambient music that you can have playing in the background or take a half hour to just meditate, do yoga, do a nap, whatever have you. This is great opportunities to listen to some new artists and new music. And on the website, there's a wonderful little community of people chatting if the people are, listening at the same time. Check them out.
I dig it.
But one thing that a strangely isolated place does not sell are forks.
Wait, they don't?
They do not, and therefore I believe we should stick a fork in this episode for part 1 and then kick things back up next week for part 2.
Or maybe a tuning fork. But that wraps up this Dropping a Beat edition of the Bellingham Podcast. Thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you like to get your podcast. Remember, if you're in the Bellingham area, you might drop a needle on KMRE 102.3 FM.
They are community powered where the dope beats go all over the internet at kmre.org.
And on that sick beat, I'm AJ Barsay.
I am Chris Powell, and we thank you for joining in to the Bellingham Podcast.
Mars? What?
Yeah, back in the 80s, Mars, pump up the volume, dance. That was for those of you who don't understand, that was a hook from the initial intro of the show.
King of the quips.